watching Coach Speak with Erik DeRoo. In today's episode, we're going to do a comparison between high school and AAU basketball in regards to exposure, the recruiting process, getting seen and evaluated by college coaches, and everything in between. So let's get right into it. With high school basketball, it's an incredible opportunity to play with your friends, to compete for championships, for state championships, for district titles, and to represent your school and your community. But in regards to the recruiting process, it plays a significantly less part of the recruiting process in regards to exposure and evaluating for college coaches. So let's explain why. The big picture of most people call it July recruiting, but it's the summer eval, open live periods, whatever you want to call it, where college coaches, primarily Division I coaches, can go out to watch AAU tournaments in the summer. There's usually one in April, one in May, in a couple of weeks in July. That could be changing in the years to come, but that's generally the idea of live recruiting periods for Division I coaches in the summer. And for these 3, 4, 5 eval periods that we have, we get a great opportunity to see as many players as possible during this condensed time span. During the 2 solid weeks in July, which is the only thing that we had this year as Division I college basketball coaches, we got to see hundreds of players play, and we got to do a bunch of live evals on as many players as basically we could find and watch over these 2-week periods, like a 10 to 11-day period that we get to go out. During these AAU live periods, we get to see teams from across the country, from across the state, within our region, so states, bordering states from where we're at, and we get to see just a ton of players. You can see where that's different during the high school season. During the high school season, when we go to a game, we see 2 teams play. And so we're getting to evaluate 20 players max that play on 2 teams, most of which will never have the opportunity to play college basketball. Pretty typically, we go to a high school game, we're hoping that 2 or 3 players on the court have a chance to go to play Division I when we're recruiting and evaluating players. Just economically, it doesn't make as much sense to go find new players during the high school basketball season. So you would rarely see a college basketball coach randomly show up to a game hoping to find a new player. Typically, when college coaches show up to a high school game, they know the players there to watch. The players know that coach is coming to see them. That coaching staff knows that a Division I coach or college coach is coming to watch X player play that evening. It's a pretty well-established thing. Only a few times a year for each program do we go watch a player we don't really even know much about. And that comes about by phone calls, texts, emails from people that know us personally saying, hey, you should look at this player because they might fit your system. This player's for sure Division I. If you haven't seen them play yet, you should come watch. And in West Texas, that happens pretty often. There's quite a few players in West Texas that just don't have the opportunity to play AAU basketball or just live so far west that there's not a lot of opportunities or haven't been seen yet. And so unless they're going and winning a state title, they can get lost in the shuffle every once in a while and not seen. So we trust our AAU and high school coaches in West Texas to say, hey, if you haven't seen this player, you should go watch him. So every once in a while, I'll drive 2, 3, 4 hours west and go see a player we've never heard of in hopes that they're good enough or in hopes that we can eval them for them to potentially come play at ACU. But traditionally, when we go to a high school game, it is well established that we know this player. There's a reason why we're going to go see this player. We want them to see us in most situations because we've already offered it. We want to see them to see that we're actively recruiting them, and we really want them to be a part of our program. In the AAU season, we have so much time over those 11, 12 days to see as many players as basically we want. We go through basically a roll sheet to make sure we see all the players we're supposed to see that we've already added to our recruiting list and we need another eval on, or they're a primary recruit and we need to go sit on to make sure that they know that ACU is still recruiting them and that we want them to be a part of our program as well. A lot of people struggle when college coaches just don't show up to high school games during the high school season that often. And as you really think about it, I live in Abilene, and our general recruiting area is within 6 hours radius of Abilene. We've signed players with 8, 10 hours, Louisiana, Kansas, far south Houston, which is slightly out of our 6 hour radius. But for the general ballpark, it's within 6 hours. So we can drive there and drive back in the same day and not miss two things. It's also expensive. Every time we make a trip to see a player play, even if it's just Dallas, let's go through the economics of going to see one player play a high school game in Dallas. I have to leave by 2. Let's say they play at 6. I have to leave by 2 because I'm going to hit Dallas traffic in my rental car, which is going to cost me close to $100 per day, depending on the prices of rental cars at that point. And then it's going to take me a tank of gas there and back. I have to fill up when I get back, so give it a full tank. So let's say another $40 for gas. I'm going to have for sure one meal on the road, maybe a meal and a half, depending how late I get back. I might grab something at a McDonald's or a Whataburger as I stop by. So going to see one player in Dallas play one high school game is going to put us back at least $150, between $100 and $150 every time we go to a game. And then it's me away from our current players on our roster, missing practice. Every once in a while, a college coach will miss a game to go recruiting. A lot of things go into logistics and finances of watching players play. So a lot of people will complain about how expensive books are. The notebooks that we get as college coaches during AAU events, $400, $500, $100 extra per book. But that value is we're spending that extra $100 for an extra book or an extra coach to get into a tournament to see hundreds of players. Where when we drive to go see one player play one high school game that we already know about, we're investing that $100 to $150 in that player, hoping that we're going to get them to come play at ACU. So it's a budget thing. We can't just go out, at least we as a mid-major, and especially Division IIs and Division IIIs and NAIs and JUCOs don't have the luxury to spend whatever they want on recruiting. We're not flying to games during the high school season. We did it 2 years ago when we recruited Paige and Borski from New York. We flew one time up to New York to go watch her play right before she signed. But other than that, we're not flying. High mid-majors and Power Fives have the luxury to fly every once in a while. Power Fives are taking charter planes across the country, but even high mid-majors are maybe taking a commercial flight from Dallas to Wichita or Dallas to Kansas City or whatever it may be. But it's still not as common as in getting a rental car and driving to whatever game you need to be at. So it's finances. But going back to exposure and getting seen, it's just harder to get seen at a high school event. Even if it's a big tournament, it's harder to get seen at a high school event because college coaches are much less evaluating during those times. They're much more there to see specific players, and they're either evaluating them, decide if they want to offer them a scholarship, or they're literally sitting there with their logo on saying, we want you to come play for us, and I'm going to invest my time and our budget money into you as a player, hoping that you come play for my university. That's what high school basketball and evaluating is all about. The AAU summer is fundamentally about finding new players, adding them to our recruiting list, and then sitting on players that we already know. There's two vast differences in the high school and AAU season. Again, there's always situations where high school players can be seen for the first time during the high school season, players moving in, players that don't play AAU basketball getting seen for the first time on the high school circuit. A lot of players explode during the playoffs and become more recognizable names for college coaches as they make deep runs to the state tournaments. A ton of college coaches go to state tournaments at the end of the year. As for some of the better players are either found or evaluated more. Those events, obviously, you can evaluate college coaches because it's high level basketball. But at the end of the day, exposure, getting seen by college coaches in the evaluation process are significantly more advantage at the AAU season in the summer than high school season. Yes, there's advantages to high school basketball, and it's part of the recruiting process. College coaches will go to high school practices, they'll go to games, they'll go to tournaments, they'll go to the playoffs, and everything between to further evaluate or to court you in the recruiting process, but significantly less evaluating and finding new players happens during the high school season. That's just my thought on it. High school versus AAU basketball in regards to recruiting and exposure. Thanks for watching. Coach Speak with Erik DeRoo.